that, right? You focus so much on your early career on technical things, like, is this looking good, is this reading well? Eventually that actually, I start to realize how unimportant that stuff becomes, and that there are far more important things. And these are things. Hey everybody, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Tyler Edlin, and thank you for watching. I've been a creative illustrator and designer in games and in animation now for about 10 years, and today I'm going to give you some tips on how I got to where I'm at. I get questions every week. This one came in from Facebook, and I thought it'd just be a great little one to address over here on YouTube. And basically they're asking, what is the path one walks to get where you're doing, and they're studying certain things, and what are the steps that I kind of go through. I've kind of gone through those in some capacity, of course, by this point on this channel. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to break down 4 major areas of my career up to this point. I'm going to go over a challenge I face. I'm going to go what I learned, and of course how to go through and troubleshoot and problem solve different areas of that. And if that's not enough for you, I'm also going to include this lovely time lapse of me designing a seaside cityscape in the background, as I have an affinity for those. I just absolutely can't get enough of them. So hope you're along for the ride, and let's go. Alright, so in part 1, we're going to call it the art school years, or the subtitle will be the circle of suck. So let's break that down and get into it. So, right early on, a lot of us are absolute beginners, myself included. I was a a B level student in high school in arts. I was a B, constantly getting B's in college, basic art classes. I was always very average when it came to my art. And I'm going to talk in this particular section what I may have done differently than a lot of people that don't end up making it to full professional career in the creative field. And that's going to be this circle of suck. And I'm going to get into and explain what I mean by that, of course. So, right, a college in art school beyond the basic high school level stuff, there's various different degrees of that, of course. There could be whole videos about that. I went to a private art school, or rather I should disclose, it was a college or university that had an art department. There's a major difference. In most cases, these scenarios aren't as well as going to a full design school like RISD or the Art Center. Those are much more prestigious, probably get a lot more out of them, and a lot pricier. But my school wasn't cheap, and I really just went there because I was A, young, B, naive, and C, it was really close to home, so I didn't have to pay for room or board, so it was convenient. But like I said, it was just a very bare minimum sort of art school leveling. I learned the fundamentals. That's what a lot of people really kind of get through if you put your time in at art school, and that's all I did. I wasn't grinding after hours in class. I was just putting what I had to do because I was young. I was playing video games, chasing girls, doing all the regular young guy things, right? So like anything, art school is for getting your training wheels in art, because like a lot of people, like a lot of you, I assume too, you graduate from either high school or even art college, you get into the real world and you're like, well, I just practiced a lot. I'm not employable at all. How do I become employable? This is hard. You start to get faced in every direction with all sorts of challenges. I was no exception to this. I was almost crippled at times, just like mentally, like, what do I do? But often what I had to do out of and post college, post high school, I had to take more classes. I had to figure out what I was kind of into, what I was not into, where my weaknesses were, like really being honest with yourself. Like, what do I suck at? For me, it was rendering, it was lighting, composition was average, bare minimum at best. A lot of my skills were just not there. I couldn't even tell the difference in like 2006 or 7 when this was, what the difference between like concept art, illustration, and fine art was. I could pick them out, but I couldn't break it down and explain it to you. Heck, I still can't explain it in the proper words, but right, fine arts are about expression. Design is art as a product with particular goals that solves problems, right? That's the surface level explanation, but I didn't understand that. I just knew I wanted to make art for games and maybe animation. I was obsessed with Studio Ghibli movies. I love my Final Fantasies and Zeldas, all that good stuff. The Halos coming out this week, guys. Who's getting in on that? Let me know. But yeah, I was really, I wasn't sure what to do. So I just kept learning. I kept learning, and I would take local classes at like art museums. I'd take fantasy art stuff, took up photography, tried a bunch of things beyond college. I kept at it. And I was also working, right? Because a lot of us are working other jobs at this point. I, again, was also doing that. I was working at the family business. We have a blacksmith and steel shop. We make metal parts for companies, all over the world. I could have, the easier route right here, I could have just settled up, fell into the family business, and just kind of followed through that way. And that could have been my path. I never wanted to, wasn't into it, didn't feel it. My brother took over instead. So often enough, right, the harder path sometimes, is like the one for you. And don't ever pick something because it's easier or not. I think that's the big takeaway there. But, I kept going back to it, and I was just slightly better each time. So I'm going to put on screen now what this sort of circle looks like for a lot of people, right? We're all beginners. We're bad at art. We practice art because we seek to improve. Whether that's in school or right out of school, we learn it is hard and it's a challenge. What a lot of people do, as I see it all the time, is they will start to drift off, right? They'll take the easy path. As I just said, they'll lose focus. They'll get involved with life. You get pulled constantly away from art. And then you're back at practicing again, and you're still equally as bad, right? Rarely improve substantially enough. So you have to break this circle and essentially kind of spiral out of it. Now, this comes from somewhere else. Disclaimer, I don't know where it was. This has been in my notes for 2 to 3 years now, and it applied very specifically to this video, so that's why it's here. But what we got to do here is essentially, right, make this turn where it's hard. Instead of drifting, you got to go back, practice more, like I did, right? I kept going back, taking more classes, filling in my weaknesses. I was posting on forums, trying to get feedback on conceptart.org back in the day. And what's going to happen, you're going to be back at the start, essentially, where you still suck, but it's going to be slightly less, right? You will improve, practice. There'll be new challenges. There won't be the same challenges. You'll get on a whole new tier of challenges. And you go back and you're going to, right? You're going to go around and spiral out of that beginner and intermediate phase. You'll get better and better. You're going to learn these are all, right, skills that can be tangibly trained and they can be built up, but you have to put in the work. And unlike a lot of fields, unlike a lot of jobs, there is a long time before you see any return, right? There's a large investment on us, the artist and the creator. Sometimes it's financially, sometimes it's mentally draining. Of course, it takes that dedication. I have videos about all that. And you just have to be in it for the long haul, and you have to enjoy that process. And I think we all cope with this challenge very differently. What I always did at these years, I spread myself out over numerous endeavors. I was always constantly physically training, still into that. I love my video games. I played it pretty competitively back in the day too. I was on the dating scene very, actively back then. I was doing a little bit of client work that came in from DeviantArt and personal work. But I really never just sat there 14, 12 hours a day and just grinded the art. I always kind of switched things up, kept a fairly active and healthy rotation of things, and I always just got invested in the moment with what was in front of me or what was at hand. And I think that was very healthy. Keep things separate, keep things moving. That way I'm not so invested in something. If something didn't go my way, I wouldn't have like a total mental breakdown of it, or it would, it would cripple me. No, you got to keep working through things. That's what really kind of helped me. And it just really takes the edge off and helps you be kind of present mentally, leading that kind of balanced level of interest across numerous things. And so beyond like this level, once I started not sucking as much, getting very beginner level kind of commission stuff through DeviantArt, I will categorize this second tier of better get social, right? And this is when I was practicing again more and more, did more and more jobs, and I started to strengthen bonds more from art school. I would get new ones from the various people I was working with, some that I still, with people I work with today. And I was active on the concept art forums. There was about Facebook was very, very new at this time. Wasn't used in any kind of professional capacity except for to catch up with old high school buddies you hadn't seen in 6 years. But it was a thing though. Like now it's a thing. Facebook, Instagram, the Twitters, whatever's out there, right? There's various ways to spread yourself out and to communicate with others and to build and strengthen relationships. It's a lot of this field is about these relationships, especially early on, because often enough your artwork may or may not be strong enough to get the attention it needs or to be strong enough to really lift you above the sea of them. But if you're really collaborating with others often, if you're in these circles getting feedback, providing feedback to others, you guys will start to grow out of it together, and you could bolster each other's work and share clients, essentially build that clientele together. Now if you want to like uptrade the skill or the circle of friends, like get your work and known in circles of artists, let's say a tier above you, there's different ways to do that. For people that put their stuff in front of me that are still learning, it's various ways. I would say a lot of people get my attention either by buying my product, giving me a good review, sharing my posts, commenting them. I can't tell you how many people I just follow that I would normally never follow on Instagram because their work doesn't necessarily spark my, ignite my engine immediately. But like if people are really nice and engage with me on platforms, I'm going to follow them back. I'm going to offer whatever support I can, right? But they'll be on my radar. Same when they take classes with me, or if you take classes with at other schools and instruct, like just show up to class, impress the hell out of your classmates, form bonds with your classmates. Out of the 6 years I've been teaching, the best classes are the ones that are in a very friendly way competitive with each other, and they're really driving up the quality of the work and communicating with each other, across the board. But that also gets my attention. It helps them. It's super healthy to be social with your art, despite the misconception that we all have to be recluse and shut-ins. It's actually extremely detrimental in this particular field, entertainment design, if you do that. Don't recommend it at all. But you could take mentorships. There's tons of ways you can get on the radar of like higher tier artists. But show up, be kind, be polite, be generous. Kindness always circles back. That's the bottom line here. So I'll put a little infographic for this to sum it up, right? Art networks you can get through various schools. You can get classmates and instructors from that whole pool. From communities, you can go to online forums, social medias, art groups on Discord and Facebook, and then within jobs themselves, producers, art leads, directors. Get your name into as many hats as you can and be known for being good at really one thing. Have your signature sort of your move that people will think of you when a certain thing comes up. Like this is the horror art guy, or this is the dude that does awesome fantasy landscapes. This is the Zelda artist, or this is the guy that does hard surface design and sci-fi helmets really good. You'll get out there, and that's all it takes. So let's move on to the next tier, which we'll call the early career. So like I've been working 3 or 4 years at this point, and I'm going to call it imposter syndrome. And I have covered this a few times. I'll have links and videos below as well. But I worked for a lot of small and mid-sized studios, so indie stuff, lots of mid-level like computer game software. Did a ton of that, and built and kept building on the portfolio over the years. I, of course, continued to work on the social networks during this time. But eventually what happens to a lot of us, and I, again, was no exception to this, And I'm gonna call this a creative debt. I think Jake Parker, another person that has a video on something very similar. I think he called it art debt or creative bank account, something like that. I'm going with creative debt in this video, but essentially, this stuff when you're constantly outputting and creating, it's gonna eventually build up on you, and it's very common for a lot of creative professionals to start to feel anxiety, self-doubt, burnout, maybe it's art block, essentially letting any kind of negative emotions get the best of your creativity. I didn't experience a ton of this, and I haven't in many, many years, but it occasionally will creep back. And I think that's a huge thing that separates a lot of like long-term professionals from people trying to break by that entry point, is being able to manage that, because it is extremely, it's very common, and it's kind of part of the role, and it's just learning to like put your put on your armor and kind of take the hit. But in reality though, there's ways to kind of offset that, and that's to build enough right in your creative bank account, as Jake Parker calls it, to offset that. So you need to manage this tax on this creative output, and usually it's actually fairly simple. It just means you're keeping a balanced life for the most part, as I always try to do. You're being constantly inspired. So reading, watching, playing games, take the time out of the grind to do things you love. Otherwise, it will fatigue you mentally, physically. It's going to pay its toll on your body for sure. And again, even with imposter syndrome, I still had to, face major holes in my training. Certain 3D cinematography business classes became an early career. Was I invoicing people well? How could I get better prices? I had that video recently on that. I'll have that below. Like a lot of this other stuff that kind of comes up once you get going that you don't really foresee, and marketing stuff that you don't plan for just doing your basic art training. So constantly putting that, working on myself. That has never been something that like I can neglect, and I don't recommend anyone to neglect that. Is you have to make sure you have enough time to work and develop on yourself outside of creative work, professional work, your commissions, your contract stuff. You got to constantly keep working on your skills and your interests. That's what's really helped sustain my positivity and my overall creative output over the years. And I predict that's gonna, what long term, like when I'm my mid 40s and 50s and hopefully 60s, if I can even live that long, hopefully it'll be into there too. But a lot of us at the early stages will face fatigue from art tests, rejects. A lot of us do get frustrated in that regard. I recommend to a lot of people, and I see this happen in interactions online every week. A guy was expressing extreme frustration from getting rejected from another art test. And again, because he's socializing and meeting and mingling with professionals above him, or friending them at least on Facebook. Someone, Reed Southern saw that post, who's been in the industry about as long as I have, working pretty much, I think, just game. No, he didn't. He does movie art, but he laid in some really great feedback, and it's just like, you got to ask, like, if you're getting rejected, you have to at least try to figure out why, either from the people that rejected you, which I know often can be hard, or go to some other professionals or art groups and like, look, this is the work I just submitted for blank and I failed and I don't know why. Can someone maybe be a little objective on what I need to improve, right? So again, coming back to the social thing, you gotta lay into that when you're getting frustrated and stuck, so you can get that reinforcement on what you need to fix, right? Because if you don't know what's wrong, often enough we're stuck too much in the weeds, in the thick of it, and we can't objectively look at our own work. And especially too, if we're getting reject after reject and we don't know why, we need, like, preferably some other professional's opinion that's not tied to you or that role, to like, okay, maybe this is why. That's all it takes. And of course, this artist that I saw online this week was super thankful for that. But I do recommend, and I try to instill this in myself, though sometimes it can be hard in the moment, is really coming to grips with being eager to solve other people's problem, like a traditional kind of service industry. I feel like what I try to offer my clients is a creative service and trying to help them solve problems. And again, you have, and like I mentioned previously, it loving this prof loving this process is a large part of it. It can't always be about some sort of end tier goal or some kind of particular client or company. That's always nice, but you just have to love creating and serving, right? Serving other people's needs. And the other big thing is being teachable, right? I'm always trying to be open with constructive feedback and criticism, and asking, one hard thing for me was like asking these younger guys that are like 3D whizzes and really good at certain things, like, what, I gotta take my experience hat off at the door. Been doing this for 10 years, and ask these younger guys, like, how the heck are you doing this? This looks amazing. This takes me way too long. Just being a lot more humble about certain things, which for some of us is easier than others. But just have the I think I think having the capacity to set myself, my interest and proclivities aside are the some of the qualities that keep companies coming back, again and again. So to sum this section up, remember there is a thing called creative debt, and if you're creating art and or any kind of design stuff, you're constantly outputting, which costs a bunch of things internally and sometimes physically, of course, but you got to deposit, work on the input of inspiration, travel, observation, physical training, right? And just daily things. Keep that balance in mind. All right. So let's look at the last one, which I'm going to call the mid-career, which that's where I kind of gauge myself right now. Being in my late 30s is a mid-career. Trying to get better. And what I have to do now more than anything is tackle problems more efficiently. And I start to realize more and more. You get to a level with technical stuff, like, okay, I can, with enough hours or time on a project, I can paint my way or get 3D resources to get anything on a technical scale, like just that, right? You focus so much on your early career on technical things, like, is this looking good? Is this reading well? Eventually that actually, I start to realize how unimportant that stuff becomes, and that there are far more important things. And these are things like communication. I've been talking a lot this video about communication. Your reputation, which almost kind of stems from your community. The art community has seen last year alone, and I'm not going to name anybody. A lot of people were outed for some questionable things they did. They disagree or agree with any side. I'm not going to take that here. But reputations were shattered almost in an instance. Got to be careful of that sort of thing, and we have to, maintain good relationships with as many people as we can. And then your ability, as I just said, to problem solve. These three things I feel are far more important than technical skill. Because again, technical skill you can build up over an entire career. As your reputation, some of these things can get shattered instantaneously. And then we find ourselves in a very different circumstances we have to kind of fight our way out of. So you start to get a much broader perspective, or I'm starting to get a much broader perspective of all this stuff. And I think one way is that I constantly kind of keeping myself on, not necessarily on edge, but let's say in art shape, is I constantly find different ways to tackle different problems in my personal work, which is why my personal work in the last 2 years has looked very different. From Blender stuff to having fun in the VR to just approaching simple studies. I'm trying to solve different problems in different creative ways all the time. I'm just not, and this is okay for some people that do, but I know for me, I have to constantly try different things, even if it seems really obvious or not so obvious in some instances. Like, I'm not going to just do portraits for a week, or I'm going to do just buildings, or I'm just going to do landscapes with just geometric shapes, or just use the lasso tool, right? There's a lot of ways to keep yourself creatively evolving. And one way I am trying to improve and become more efficiently, of course, as well, is I'm trading my creative services with others, taking on apprenticeships, things like that. When a student comes up to me and says, I will do anything to make it in this field, and very few of them actually say that, but I know the ones that said that are super serious and into this stuff. I'm like, all right, I'll trade you. Like, what are you really good at? And I could take them on. I can give them help and they can give me something, help with my social media posts. You guys love the new Instagram content. It's done by a former student that's really good at graphic design and can help take that weight off my chest, and I give them feedback to help them grow. So I'm learning, delegation and more about managing my time to balance my ever so demanding family life. But it's something I'm tackling that I think a lot of guys my age start to do in this mid-career. And I'm trying to get my business, or it's hitting that point where if I'm actively doing something non-essential that I can't delegate out, it's costing me time and it's costing me money. Time you can't get back, money you can always move around, get more of, But time, time is the fourth thing above technical skill that's more important. So that's my takeaway, guys. Let me know what you think. Where are you at in your career? Are you trying to get a career? I assume a lot of people watching this are trying to get their career going. And if there's any topics in here you'd like me to expand upon, if there's other ideas you want me to weigh in on, let me know. I'm always looking for content suggestions. Hit me up on this platform or literally any of them, and I will catch you guys next time. All right? Thank you again.